Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardena. I am so excited for this week's episode. We've had a lot of authors this year, resilient citizens. We're going to be talking to Dr. Chris Ellis on here. He's prior military. He's done a lot of really cool stuff. He's really passionate about this. Funny enough, we were both just in Europe and talking about readiness or overseas and being fascinated by that. So really cool dude. Like I said, I've just been in Europe for the last couple of weeks, so a really big shout out to the Dutch military and our good friends, the NATO partners that we work with, the Specific Environments Panel, and everybody else. Andre Mackey, he was on the podcast this summer, the director there, and or should I say the chair, and it was good to see him and catch up, and maybe we'll have some of those other guys on the show soon. But I promised I would give him a shout out, so you got that, guys. And with that, let's bring on Dr. Chris Ellis, who I think we'll just go by Chris, but he's a pretty cool guy. Welcome, Doc. How you doing?
Hey, great. Thanks for being on the show, John. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm glad to be on the show. Thanks. This is a good thing for us. So you have an incredible background, which we'll probably get to in a little bit, but I already prefaced the audience with your book. I got some stuff out of it. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later, but just to help us set the stage for the conversation, can you talk to us about your passion between military and going into kind of that disaster world and how you came up with that perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So people talk about disasters in many different ways. And so I kind of like to tell just 3 stories about fire and water. So my youngest memory my entire life is disaster. I was 3 years old when Mount St. Helens erupted. I was living in Washington State. And the only thing that I remember about that was that I was at my grandparents' house for some reason, and I wanted to go outside and play. And they said, yes, you can go outside and play, but 2 things. You have to wear a mask, and you can't play with any gray snow. That was my youngest memory that I can think of right now, was Mount St. Helens exploding in 1980. So that's kind of story number 1, how disasters is kind of personally affecting. They don't have to be disastrous as far as, your house gets taken out by lava or something like that, but just something that just personally you remember. A second way to look at disasters is how academics study them. So we just had Hurricane Melissa that hit Jamaica. And we can talk about that the hurricane had this many millibars of pressure. We can talk about it was this much wind speed. It lasted this long. The hurricane season writ large was this. The ranking as compared to others was whatever. And there's an academic way to discuss that, but that kind of dismisses, or at least glosses over the real impact of people that had to live through those things or had a loved one die. You could go all the way back to the 1793 Laki volcano that erupted in Iceland and say, well, statistically speaking, we know that 80% of the sheep on that island died because of poisonous gases and lava flow, and 20% of the population also perished from gases, the resulting famine. And worldwide, the impacts were 6 million dead, including 600,000 in Egypt from drought and famine. Okay, there's nothing wrong with studying these things from a very academic perspective, meteorology and weather, et cetera, or geology or volcanology, et cetera. But that's one way to look at this. And then a final way to look at this is just how disasters indirectly affect us. So one final story before we move on. Here's one more. This one I really enjoy. So in July 1815, Mount Tambora, which is in Indonesia, it erupts. Massive. It's the largest volcanic eruption recorded in 1,500 years. It affects the planet. Europe had the coldest summer on record for 250 years, for about a 2,000-year period, and that they recorded. So France was about 10 degrees colder that summer than it had ever been before. Okay, how does that impact us? Well, in 1816, they called it the year without summer. So this English poet named Lord Byron, he was actually living in Switzerland on Lake Geneva, rough life. And he invited some of his friends over to kind of discuss, life and things like that, and kind of just have some cheer to an otherwise gloomy summer. And he asks his friends, hey, folks, let's write some ghost stories. So one of the individuals that was there was Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein on that trip. Another individual that was there was a guy named John William Polidori. He was the writer and Lord Byron's personal physician. He wrote a short story called The Vampire. It was the first vampire story ever written 80 years prior to Bram Stoker's Dracula. So when we talk about disasters, we can talk about it in an academic sense. We can talk about how it impacts us culturally over centuries, or we can talk about the personal impacts to us as well. So when I think about disaster, think about that in those three ways.
Okay, first of all, I instantly like you because I'm a guy who likes analytics, and so like the academic all the way through the cultural. You know, people often ask me, like I think I've talked about a lot on the show. To be honest, we're building on a new podcast studio, so a lot of my stuff is over in the other one. But one of my favorite books, to be honest, from like an academic perspective, is Social Vulnerability and Disaster, and it talks about like all these data points. Some of that you mentioned, it talks about others, and basically researchers from the UN went through and saw over time how disasters impacted culture. From the immediate impact all the way through like long-term impact. In fact, that was what was my thesis in my master's program, my capstone project, if you will, is like the anthropology and disasters and these case studies. And so instantly like you from that. From my personal perspective, my church perspective, we talk about what happened in 1816, and there was a huge cultural shift, even in the United States after that, from people having to move because of the farming issues and trying to find land and, creating disparity inside the United States. So there's a whole side of that. So I think it's absolutely fantastic that you just like came right out of the gate of like, oh, I like that stuff. The last point, again, dog and a squirrel kind of moment, or dog with a squirrel, is my father passed away in December, and he was a geologist 40 years ago. And one of the gifts that, or one of the things that he put in his will was ash that he collected from Mount St. Helens, knowing that I like disasters. So in our podcast studio that we're building, I have a little jar of the ash that he collected. I've wanted to get it tested for a really long time because knowing my dad, he was probably like, oh, like if I just burn this wood in the back, maybe I could just say it's ash from Mount St. Helens. But yeah, I'm hoping it's real. Dad, on the other side, hopefully you're getting a good laugh at that. But for the sake of conversation and understanding the fascination you have from the academic to the cultural to your own personal experiences, it sounds like this was a lifelong thing, but you took the military route, which is way more exciting than the emergency management route, let's be honest. So if your fascination is with disasters, was there like an ebbs and flow moment where, that was a lava pun. If you got away from this stuff, you joined the military. I would love to know why you joined the military, and specifically, what has led you back into wanting to push for resilient citizens and this kind of perspective?
Yeah,
it's
no
kind
problems.
of a twofold question, if that makes sense.
It's fine. Yeah. So when I was a kid, there was three things that I knew for sure that I wanted more than anything else. Number one, I wanted to get married. My parents had divorced when I was a very young age, and so that's another disaster that just kind of impacts folks.
My whole life is a disaster.
Yeah, I use disaster very broadly. So that was one. I want to be married. Number two, I wanted to be a Christian. I wanted just that eternal peace. I wanted stability in my life, and I definitely wanted to be a Christian as a kid. And the third thing I wanted to do is I wanted to join the Air Force. I wanted to join the Air Force because I really wanted to be an astronaut. And I really wanted to be an astronaut because I wanted to be the first piloted mission to Mars. That's what I wanted to do for my entire childhood.
Wow, that's cool.
So I show up to my ROTC physical. I'm 17 years old. It's Joint Base Lewis McChord at Washington State. And I go in there for my Army, my Air Force physical. I'm really excited. And they hook me up to the EKG machine. And they're like, your heart rate is abnormally low. Actually, you're medically disqualified. You can't even join the military. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, yeah, this is just too low for somebody to be, alive, basically.
Don't they want a low heart rate? Yeah,
but I was abnormally low. So she's like, something's probably wrong with the machine. So she hooks the machine back up. She leaves the room. I'm doing flutter kicks as she's out of the room. She comes back in. She's like, oh, this is totally normal. I'm like, okay, thank God, sweat off the brow for that. We finish up the entirety of the medical evaluation. And she's like, oh, I got one more test for you. And she opens up this book and she holds up this book and it's a whole bunch of dots. And she goes, what number do you see? And I'm like, oh man, this must be the psych test. I don't see anything. No numbers. She's like, flips the page. What numbers do you see? I don't see any numbers. Definitely the psych test. Flips the page. Oh, number 17. She goes, Chris, you're red ring colorblind. You will never join the Air Force as a pilot. And I was devastated. I walked out of that place. I'm crying. I'm bawling. I had accidentally parked in the commanding general's parking spot. I didn't know that because it said general parking. So I go to the base security, and I'm 17-year-old. My entire life's destroyed. My tears are coming down my face. And I'm like, what does this $27 fee mean? Who's a first sergeant? And he's like, get out. And I'm like, is this going to affect my insurance long term? He's like, just get out. And I'm like, okay. So I joined the Army instead. And it was a revolutionary change. I got to lead some incredible individuals, and 9/11 happened, and I got to do a ton of deployments downrange: Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait. And where my disaster epiphany really happened was on my third deployment. I was in Iraq, and it was a rough deployment. It was during the surge. It was 2007, 2008, and it was rough. And I mean, really rough. We had IEDs and car bombings and assassinations and things like that. We had all the kinetic things that you would think about. And then we also had these just insanely, what we in America would consider very mundane. I was in this area that was just on the outskirts of Baghdad, and it was a Sunni area, and they'd been dispossessed. They used to be in power, and now they were second-class citizens. So they had very, very little. It was a farming community. And they would come to me like, hey, Chris, or Naqib Ellis, Captain Ellis, which is in Arabic, Naqib Ellis, my shower doesn't work. I'm like, oh, I'm a captain in the Army. Like, what do I have to do with your plumbing? I have no idea. It's like, no, you don't understand. The valve that turns the plumbing on to my house is over in this Shia area, and the Shia is not turning the valve on to let us have any water. So go fix it. So we drive over this area, and we'd figure it out. And then the next day, hey, Naqib Ellis, the electricity hasn't come on. I can only charge my cell phone. That's all I have electricity for each day. Is just enough to charge my flip phone. Okay, let me go figure that out. So I would go to like the power distribution plants and find out that there was corruption happening there because they were getting bribed to turn the switches to some areas and not some other areas. Okay. All right, Naqib Ellis, our schools don't have stamps so the children can get their graduation certificate each year. Like, okay, I have no idea what to do on that one, so help me out. You get the person I'm supposed to meet with, and I'll go meet with that person, and we'll get the stamp. Okay, so I come back a couple weeks later. Okay, Naqib Ellis, we had the meeting. We'll take you there. We'll sit in your vehicle, and we'll drive you to where we're supposed to go. Okay, great. I'm thinking I'm going to go to like the local county, commissioner's office no. We're driving into Baghdad, and we're driving on these near black routes. Black routes are routes where they have IEDs go off all the time. Military vehicles weren't allowed to go on there because there were so many vehicles getting hit. We were driving right next to these vehicles, and we're getting deeper and deeper into Baghdad. And I'm like, where are we going? They got me a meeting with the Vice Deputy Minister of Education. I'm meeting with the number 2 person in all of Iraq for education.
That's awesome.
And I walk in there, and I'm like, well, own it. And I'm like, hey, these people are driving me nuts. They need a stamp. And a week later, we had the stamp. So I get back from that. I've been nation building now numerous times. The military has not prepared me for this whatsoever. And I'm really angry because we did have some success there. We did get electricity flowing. We got their irrigation going. We got the schools running again. We had businesses that went from 3 businesses in basically their town center to 27, I think, when I left. So we had some great success, but I was just really angry because the Army didn't prepare me for this at all. And it was at the point of the spear of just helping individuals, that street level bureaucracy that I really wanted to get well at. So the Army was offering people to go back and get master's degrees. And I said, I want to get a master's degree, and I want to get a master's degree in nation building. If I'm going to keep doing this for the next 10 years, I want to be good at it. So I found the best university in the nation. And at the time, it happened to be the University of Kansas because they did city and local governance. I went there and got a master's degree. And that was the epiphany moment of, I really like this disaster stuff.
That's awesome.
So go ahead.
No. It's just to quick pause there. The my favorite stories on here are when like it's almost like the field pulls you in rather than you search it out. And it is so much more natural, and you're so much better at it. And it feels like it's more sustainable that way because it's like it's a natural passion versus a career thing where I think even myself, but I think most people who do the career side can get burned out pretty fast. But when it's a natural thing, oh, that's cool. That's a cool background. Sorry, I want to continue.
No, you're fine. So what I found with disasters is that it's just so multifaceted. There's just so many different disciplines that are involved. And you can look at it from what's called a multidisciplinary fashion. Multidisciplinary just means the engineers look at it one way and the physicists look at it another way and the anthropologists look at it another way. And it's kind of like the blind man looking at an elephant. What I tried to do is I said, I want to look at this in a transdisciplinary fashion because I don't know what I'm going to get asked. I could get asked anything. So I kind of want to know it all and be able to synergize it together. So thankfully, the military was kind of flush with cash during those years. So I got back. The military sent me back to get 4 master's degrees. I have a degree in public administration. I have one in counterinsurgency and insurgencies. I have one in operational art, which is kind of like strategy. I have one in international relations. And then I got to go to Cornell University for my PhD, did international relations there, international economy. So just how things work as far as the money system in the world, and then international security, which is everything from genocide to nuclear war. So I combined all of those things, plus an over 25-year career in the military, put it all together, synergized it, and wrote a book about it because I wanted America and the world to know about what these things are and kind of how people are preparing across the world, not just America.
If it makes you feel any better, I think you have enough motivation to get to Mars. I think you can. I think you could do that. I feel like that's a thing that you're able to. You remind me of a lot of Chip who works at the DEA, who came on here. I met him when he was a student at St. Louis University, where he taught at, and I think he's in his 50s. And he's like a lifelong learner. He will keep going back to school. He's already like the tip of the spear, like the coolest guy you'll ever meet. And yet one of the most humble, approachable people because he just has this like drive for knowledge and he wants to keep learning from other people. And you remind me a lot of that. And that's probably one of the highest compliments I can give you is compare you to Chip.
Thank you.
But yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the book then. The People, Perils, and Politics of Modern Preparedness. Funny enough, I'm not going to throw you under the bus here real quick, but the word preparedness is the right word. Resilient is the right word, but I've had to stop using it in my business because when we say preparedness, people think like 72-hour kits, and I had to like start using we started saying readiness, and somehow that made them feel different. But preparedness is actually the right word there. If you're talking about all your past experience and you're talking about the fire and water stuff, and you're talking about synergizing this all in the book, before we get into the contents of the book, what is the outcome you're hoping that somebody gets from reading the content? Like, what's your objective?
Absolutely. So although it's written for an American or an English audience, it is international as well. But this is the take-home point that I have for folks. Take control of your agency. Agency is the ability and will to take responsibility and to change. If you can do that, if you can look at, and we'll cover this a little bit later, if you can look at the 5 dimensions of any human being, social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, and choose one or all those things to just get a little bit better each day, that's the goal. If people come away from this and like, I'm going to take this portion of my life, I'm going to take agency over it, I'm going to take charge of it, I'm going to better myself in this way, great. That's what I'm looking for.
You said 5. I'm aware of the 4. What is, say the 5 again one more time?
Yeah, it makes the acronym SPIES: social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual.
Oh, I always leave out emotional because I'm dead inside. That makes sense. Okay, I like that. In fact, I might start. I'm gonna. You said the acronym is SPIES. I like that.
SPIES, yeah.
Yeah. Were you a spy? You sound like you were a spy.
I was not, but I actually got SPIES on a missions trip in the Czech Republic from a missionary. So that's where I took it from. Yeah, this is probably 20, 30 years ago.
That's hilarious. I can tell you a whole lot of doing stuff overseas. I lived in Japan as a missionary for 2 years, and half the people thought I was a spy, and I was like, nope, definitely not a spy. But SPIES is a cool acronym. I'm going to cut towards the end of, I think it's section 1. How many sections are in here? There's our part 1.
3 sections: People, Perils, and Politics.
Perfect. So this is the end of part 1 under the People of Preparedness. And I love the way your brain works. You have a diagram, and for people who can't see, there are 3 sections of this: longevity, foresight, and creed, to create a resilient citizen. Would you mind breaking it down, starting with creed? So creed, longevity, and foresight. Could you do that for us?
Yeah, no problem. So when people have been studying preppers for a while, and in my book, I devote a lot of the time to kind of debunking a lot of the myths. But no one's really said, what truly is a prepper? What's something that I can take it just about anywhere in the world and say, this person's a prepper in Kenya, this person's a prepper in Russia, this person's a prepper in South America, whatever, and it be applicable to everybody. So there's, always some Kentucky windage in this. Academics argue about everything, preparedness versus, readiness, etc.
Yeah.
So
it's all the
creed,
same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So creed is simply this: an individual must not participate in extremist organizations or activities as defined by the United States military. Why did I use the United States military? Because the United States military, doesn't matter what country you come from on the planet, as long as you don't espouse certain extremist creeds, you can join the military and enlist. Perfect. So if you're good enough to join the Army, if you're good enough to join the Air Force, if you're good enough to join the Navy, then you're good enough to be resilient as far as creed. So this weeds out white supremacy or Ku Klux Klan or other extremist organizations that would
Michigan fans.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
They suck. Go Bucks.
People have every single Taylor Swift album. Exactly. We gotta get rid of the nut jobs.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's one. You weed out the extremists, and then what that does, it gets rid of like the true wackos.
Yeah. Okay. I should have asked you, what state do you live in?
I currently live in Colorado Springs right now.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say, not the state of despair. I'd also throw in Alabama fans in there. They are living on legacy right now, which is ridiculous. So is Cowboy fans. Okay. So Creed is weeding out the extremists and essentially identifying those who live by what I would call a righteous creed, family, country, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Longevity. What do you mean by longevity? Yeah.
So longevity is the one where we can definitely take this throughout the world, and you either meet it or you don't. Longevity is, can you survive for 31 days or more in your community without publicly provided power, water, transportation? The reason I picked that is because that is how FEMA used to ask the question. And I wanted to have some quantitative data in America.
Yeah, I was going to say, you pulled that from, yeah, okay. Uh-huh.
So FEMA in 2018 started releasing what's called their National Household Survey. They had never released the raw data before. And when they release raw data, academics just salivate over it, especially if it's brand new. Mm-hmm. So they released the 2017 and 2018 data sets, over 5,000 people each year. The 2018 one was better because it also included territories, so U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, etc. So I wanted to get a holistic look at all of America, 50 states and 4 territories. And that's where I got the data from. And I've actually found that in America from 2017 to 2023, the number of resilient citizens by that metric has more than doubled. And I kind of watched its ebbs and its flows and its growths over time.
That's surprising. I would have thought exactly opposite.
Well, we can talk. Let's pause for this a second, because this is important. So why? I won't give the full history. I'll give a shorter history. I'll start just in the year 2001. So the Cold War is over. Life is going great. Everything's fantastic. Then 9/11 happens. And then that's one of the things that a lot of preparedness folks said, hey, that was a seminal moment for me. And then the other two, the top three, are 9/11. The second one was Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And then the third one was the 2007 and 2008 financial crisis. 3 radically different types of disasters. One's a natural disaster, one's a terrorist attack, one's an economic collapse or an economic backsliding, or whatever term you want to use. A rough.
I would say collapse for sure. Yeah, I think that'd be appropriate. Yeah.
So people cited that as like, I'm motivated now to look into this preparedness thing, but it's been so long. I've been, since pre-World War II that America had really been truly resilient in the old school definition of things. So what happens to kill the movement? A show comes along the line called Doomsday Preppers. They find the craziest people they can find, and they make it just, if you're a Doomsday Prepper, you're a nut job. So it kind of destroys the movement for a bit. Well, life kind of goes on for a bit. The election of Trump, part 1 happens, and then people from the left of center are like, wow, like holy crow, maybe I need to prepare. And so it kind of starts coming back up. It starts becoming a little bit less fringe. And then COVID hits, and COVID was a global pandemic. It was undeniable. It affected everybody in different ways. It affected you differently if you lived in New York versus Texas, but it affected folks, and they cited that. And so that was kind of like the psychological impetus to say, holy crow, I need to change things. And so that's when it went over 20 million, and it's kind of hovered there between 20 and 24 million. Unfortunately, FEMA is no longer releasing their data. 2023 is the last year, but at least I have got 6-7 years of data to kind of show the growth for that time frame.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to exactly quote you in here. On 2 parts. Funny enough, the resilient citizen is a private actor who can survive 31 days or more, which you called out, and you crossed out at home in their community, which I love, and I'll talk about that in a second, without publicly provided power, water, and transportation, which you just called out. We did like a mock podcast, I guess you could say. It was called Movie After Action Review, or Movie R. It was all about pirates, and we'd watch movies and make fun of them, kind of like a Mystery Science Theater 3000, if you've ever seen that.
Nice.
But in one of them, we did, what was it? Patrick and we did Endgame. Was it Endgame?
Ender's Game.
No. It was the Marvel one. And it's the last bit where everybody disappears for 5 years. My theory was based off of that data. If you kill half the population, everybody dies because you can't sustain yourself. Anyways, we'd fought a lot about that. But one of the call outs, we'd always try to do this thing at the end where we actually try to bring it back to reality. And I can't find a system globally where individuals are better suited than in a community, right? Like, we are designed as beings, whether in the natural world or otherwise culturally, where we need to rely on other people, right? Our mental capacity, the SPIES, right? All 5 areas are impacted by community. And man, just calling that out, you can produce so much more as a community. And then I'm going to fast forward to this other part. This is their very next page. The Amish can survive both individually and as a community for more than 31 days, which I totally agree. Still, they are not conducting their actions primarily in preparation for a coming disaster, either physical or spiritual, though Mormons by a large are. Therefore, I'm going to mispronounce this word because I'm not as smart as you. Criterion? 2 keeps many, although not all, Mormons, but eliminates the Amish as a collective. Can you expound on that for me a little bit?
Yeah. So we had 3 parts. We talked about creed, we talked about longevity, and so the third one is foresight. So when I look at resilient citizens, if you kind of prepare for disaster, just kind of life in general, not just doomsday, but every day, it's why are they doing the thing that they are doing? So that private actor must meet that longevity basis on their assessment of disaster risk, and then a paired response to that risk that it's executed well in advance. Basically, what this does is it eliminates hoarders. So if Hurricane Mike is going to come and hit Florida, and you've got a 4-day notice, and people run to Home Depot and buy plywood and go buy out Costco, I don't consider them a resilient citizen because they're in react mode. It's going to happen here in a second.
Yeah.
If you're a Montana rancher and you've got a winter's worth of feed for your cows and you're kind of prepared for the disaster of winter, that is far more along the lines of what I'm talking about. So the Mormons prepare for these larger scale disasters, both spiritually and terrestrial, for their lives. The Amish aren't preparing for disasters, just their way of life. And so we do start to get a little bit on the squishy end of things. Would I consider a Kenyan pastoralist or a Mongolian herdsman to be a resilient citizen? Yeah, I probably would. Are they preparing for the disasters we think of disasters? No, probably not. They're just preparing for life. But the issue, and you brought this up a little bit, is that these individuals, they're prepping. They've got their closet of preps. They've got their guns and their gold and their Band-Aids, beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, et cetera. And there's nothing wrong with that. But they're doing these things in a way that it's become what's called atavistic. It's an old vestigial organ that they don't know how to quite do anymore. So they're doing it individually, which again is nothing wrong. It's a step back towards the way things were. My book is to basically assist them in understanding why they're doing the things that they're doing, and to tell them that the next step is to return all the way and go back to this community orientation of the tribe survives, the group survives, the neighborhood survives, thinking along those lines rather than just, I've got my beans, bullets, Band-Aids in my bunker and my family's good to go.
So 100% agree all the way around. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, i.e. Mormon. We typically just say Church of Jesus Christ, but whatever. So 2 antidotes to that. We had a operations section chief in FEMA whose son and daughter were LDS, Latter-day Saints. And we would make the joke that every time we would go out to a big hurricane, he would know where all the LDS people were because he could hear the cans popping in their houses. Right, so they would have all that food storage, and then he's like, "Oh, that has way more cans. They're LDS. They have to be LDS." And he would talk about how he'd always ask me, he's like, how are you guys getting your volunteers there before we get there? Like, we're the strike team. And so the church has focused a lot on that community building piece, and not just like within our own community, but our neighbor. And then several years ago, so for those who don't know or are listening, the church has recommended for a long time a year's supply of food storage. And these people became essentially hoarders. And several years ago, I heard somebody from essentially church headquarters or leadership could say you're getting it wrong. That year supply for us isn't for your family. It's so that in times of need, another family across the street is going through their own personal crisis, hospital, cancer, whatever. You're able to help them out without it taking on this huge financial burden. And so it's all about this community thing. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't get that. Like, I didn't get that it was about the community. It was about helping other people. And it turned it in from, I think it helped self-correct, like this tribalism perspective of like hoarders to, oh, like we got to do this in a totally different way. There's another guy I would absolutely love for you to go on his podcast. I would love to hear your conversation. His name is Nat Sellers. Okay. He is, he says all the same things that you're saying, and he's a self-proclaimed doomsday prepper who believes more in homesteading than doomsday prepping, because he talks about like taking care of your needs, not your wants, and how to do that in a realistic and healthy way. And it's a really cool way to look at it. But that being said, the last part of this, because now that I've given the two anecdotes, going back to that Georgetown capstone that I did, one of the most fascinating things about like culture and microcultures, or these case studies, was Hurricane Katrina. There was a small Filipino community in New Orleans that they recovered exponentially faster than everybody else, and they were trying to figure out why. Well, there was one lawyer, this woman, she was a lawyer, and after she took care of her family, she started going to the other families. And as the other families learned how to file their paperwork, their insurance, they started helping out each other. And so it spread like wildfire. Instead of just, oh, I'm good, you're screwed, sorry. There was this intent that we're supposed to help out each other. And then the other really cool case study, which is like a family-based culture, is American Samoa. They were hit by a tsunami, and they recovered a lot faster based off of their standard socioeconomic level, because they have a culture that when things happen on the beach, they naturally go up into like the highlands or the mountains and start farming. And so there are these two groups of people who naturally help each other out. In times of plenty, they go down to the beaches, fish. In times of want, they go back up, and then they reuse material. And I was like, man, the U.S. is so wasteful in terms of our perspective, because one, we wait. We have a culture of waiting. You look at Puerto Rico, U.S. territory, they waited for FEMA to show up, right? Hurricane Maria, that was a huge problem. And then you have this idea of, well, I can just go to Home Depot. I can always get new stuff. I don't know how to reuse, recycle, whatever. And we are putting ourselves in a spot of detriment. So that's why I'm surprised by your analysis, or the FEMA's data that says like it's more than doubled. I understand the COVID perspective, but I've never seen more people at Home Depot and Lowe's than when I saw them at during COVID. And I don't know what most people would do for 31 days if they couldn't go and get these things. I don't know if they know how basic skills like, gardening. I think everybody has a tomato plant, but outside of tomatoes, what are they doing? So love to hear your thoughts on all that. I gave you a lot to chew on, but.
So let's try to keep it all. So the country of Chile, winter storm, and then international. Those are the three topics. So help me out here. So the country of Chile. So every country kind of has its cultural, like, what are we going to do when the big thing happens? In the country of Chile, because they're part of the Pacific Rim, Ring of Fire, one of their big metrics is the country back to normal after an earthquake or a disaster? Are the schools back? Are the schools running normal times? So that's culture. It's like, that's exceptionally important. Get the kids going back to school. That is what they really focus on. If kids are going back to school, then life's back to normal. We can go on.
That's their
So that's
Waffle
one.
House index. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a waffle. Exactly. Perfect. Exactly. So the second one is winter storm. And you brought up like a year's worth of supply. So one of the nice things about having more than what you think you may need is that if you just have a 72-hour kit and you have a winter storm and you're living in wherever, middle of nowhere, Nebraska or Maine or something along those lines, and you're like, well, I got 3 days worth of supply, and I know this winter storm is going to last X amount of days, and the trucks are stopped because the whatever, there was a landslide, there was a whatever, the roads are too icy, etc. Am I going to give 24 hours of my stuff to my neighbor? That's pretty rough. That's some sacrificial giving there. But if I have a year's worth of supply and this winter storm hits, and it's going to last 2 weeks, hey brother, hey sister, here's a month's worth of stuff. Great. Like maybe next time you'll get me, or maybe what you've got is you've got the medical supplies. So if my kid broke his leg because he went outside and just slipped on the ice and I can't get to the hospital, I provide you food and you provide me the medical knowledge that you have, and just things along those lines. You can't prepare for everything, but your society can, your community can.
I like that. Yeah.
So you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be the guy that's like, I'm the zombie apocalypse person, and I'm also the cleric, and I'm also the midwife and all. Great. I mean, by all means, go get them if you want to learn all these different skills. But we put too much pressure on preppers to saying, well, do you have a bunker for the nuclear apocalypse? No, I don't. Well, I guess you're not a real prepper then. Come on. Yeah. So then point 3 was internationally. So not only am I seeing this in America, and I don't have the quantitative data to prove this, is anecdotal only, but I do look at other countries quite a bit. And other countries are varying levels of success. Japan, like you spoke about earlier, is phenomenal. And I'll talk about them at the very end of this podcast. I just looked decently into Poland and Germany. Germany is spending, they've got a plan through 2029 to spend another 10 billion euro on bunkers. Why? Because of the Russia threat. Poland is also doing the same thing, but they're doing it more of like an older generation of Americans, where it's very individualistic. So the rich are building bunkers, and the moderate class doesn't really have the money for it. So they're trying to get local community, basically CERT teams starting up, and they're having struggles with it. It's not very successful. There's a lot of polls. I think only 45% of polls during the last survey said that they would be willing to fight for their country. There's a lot of individualism out there right now in that country, even though they have Russia and Belarus just literally kind of knocking at their doors. So different countries approach these different fears in a far different way, from the national level all the way to the individual level.
What about the U.S. and the bunker perspective? Because I think of the ultra rich, and they are building bunkers right now, but we don't.
There is a schism right now, I would say, in the bunker community. Bradley Garrett, he wrote the foreword of my book. He wrote the book called Bunkers and studied this internationally. He's my go-to guy whenever I want to know what's happening with the bunker crowd. He just got back. I talked to him a couple months ago and interviewed him, and he went to the Vivos Expo in South Dakota. And it's basically this old ammo depot in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. And it was bought out, and you could basically rent, I think, for 99 years, get a lease for 99 years, whatever it is, you could get a bunker. And it started out, and it was just a whole bunch of people going out there. And he goes, I was there a few months ago, Chris, and like, it's starting to be a community, like a no kidding community. And so it's like, great. It's the pioneers in the old Wild West, and they're actually starting to get together and have regular, habitual, social things that they do on a regular basis. I don't know if they're trick-or-treating yet or not, but they're trying to get together and do things. But the schism that has always existed is kind of the ultra wealthy. I do not consider them resilient citizens. And the reason is because a resilient citizen has to have some sort of citizen flair, where I'm willing to help out those around me, and not just my wait staff or my special forces team, ex-special forces team that's guarding me. And what we're seeing among the rich is kind of the same thing we've always done. It's the escape. They're going to escape the peril. They're going to ride it out. They're going to get in their private jet and fly to New Zealand or Uruguay or wherever. They're going to get in their bunker. They're going to be guarded, and kind of the hell with the rest of the world. They'll ride it out. And then when they can pop the can and come out of the hatch, that they'll do so. But I'm not seeing positive things out of that group right now. They're very secretive because of their wealth and their finances, and they can buy that. But overall, the anecdotes that I'm seeing is not societally positive.
Yeah, it's like concerning after like I was about to go into like hardcore conspiracy theorist, so I'm not going to do that. Hard pass on that. Yeah. I'm not the conspiracy guy. Cool. So after we stop recording, I'll get your thoughts on it. But I am trying to be sensitive to the time. I understand a lot of our people, when they listen, They have about 30 to 40-minute drive. So funny enough, we can see that on the IP addresses. Funny enough, but you brought up Japan. I have a huge passion for Japan. I did my missionary service there. That's when I started doing humanitarian aid. That's when the tsunami and earthquake hit in Tohoku, 2011. Japan is like has a special place in my heart, and I think their policy for resiliency as a community, especially their firehouses, is absolutely incredible. I think their government absolutely sucks, and I'll say that in Japanese too if you want me to later on, because they do suck at it. But that being said, the local level, I think has some really, really great stuff going on. I would love to hear you talk about Japan a little bit because you brought it up.
Sure, no problem. So I have a different perspective, and that's fine. I was in Japan for a military exercise. Yeah, I was there in Japan for a military exercise, and they found out about my background, that I was a super passionate disaster, expert. And so the number one highest ranking military member in all of Japan invited me to come back to their national exercise. I was exceptionally humbled by it. It was amazing. It was a real honor. I love that they're a shame honor culture, and I very much identify with that. So I go back there, and I saw their military do what I thought was to be exceptionally positive service. They take it incredibly seriously. We use the term DISCA in America, Defense Support of Civil Authorities. They don't call it DISCA over in Japan. It's just this is part of the military's Japanese self-defense forces for a hurricane, or typhoon, for a tsunami, for an earthquake, etc. But they take it pretty seriously. And then to your point, just down to the localized level, it's also very serious. I write one story in my book about I will not even try to pronounce it right now because I don't have it in front of me, but there's a town that has a volcano that's just a few miles away, and this volcano spews ash a couple times a day. So the community has this pyroclastic flows that come out, and then these ash that will fall on things. And the community just knows, hey, when the ash falls, you just go and you kind of pick it up. It's just part of the things that you do. It's just like picking up trash as you're walking down the street. So they, at the localized level, have very much inculcated to themselves that I am responsible for this city's safety to make sure that the place doesn't burn down.
Okay, so I was talking about like the elected officials in government and how they rotate who their minister of disaster, and they do it. I think it's it's like a 2-year cycle, or it might even be annually. And so when the Tohoku disaster happened, the guy was in there for like 7 minutes. And he was like, "What's a disaster?" And he just kept on like making things up as he was going. And it was 2011 at the time. They've not fixed their system, and they suck straight up. But everybody else, I do think like Japan doesn't have a sense of individualism. It's all about community, and so it does go into disasters really, really well because they all do take it they take protecting their community at all costs. And that goes from their level of recycling all the way through emergency readiness. So it doesn't surprise me that you had such a powerful and positive experience with their military. And huge shout out to them, for doing that. My experience in Japan, specifically after the tsunami, was, again, these local heroes, and I think about the men and women at Fukushima Daiichi who did that, and I think about these entire towns, hundreds of thousands of people who relocated without complaining, and all this stuff. But in terms of resiliency and resilient citizens, there's a really cool case study. I think I brought it up on the podcast maybe years ago for those who are listening, but researchers went in and they gave them like a really regimented schedule. So you wake up, the entire town's going to wake up at the exact same time. We're going to focus on nutrition. We're going to make you do exercises. We're going to give you tasks to do throughout the day. And that versus other towns who didn't have those resources. And you fast forward years later, and the impacts of PTSD are drastically lower because they were able to start tricking their mind saying, my body feels well, therefore I'm okay. Versus the other thing. So when I'm going through really tough moments in my personal life, it doesn't have to be, some catastrophic event affecting everybody. I try to focus on my nutrition. You wouldn't be able to tell because I have a dad bod, but I try to focus on my nutrition. I try to exercise more. I intentionally give myself like more tasks to do, small tasks that I can check off, because I know it's now a mental game and I got to get myself out of that. In fact, that just happened like literally yesterday. I was going through a bunch of stuff and I was like, man, I'm starting to get overwhelmed. Push-ups, good food, talking to my wife and having fun with my kids. And I just started checking off little boxes. And by the end of the day, I was feeling great and woke up so excited to talk with you. So it's, it's how we get through these things. I can see you have a ton of medals in the background. Is that from racing? I'm assuming you're running.
Obstacle course. Yeah, obstacle course racing. I have a bad hip, so I can't run on pavement anymore. So if you take trail running and Ninja Warrior and they have a baby, that's obstacle course racing. So Spartan races, Tough Mudders, etc.
So just throw this out there. You think that's good for your hip? You think that's easier for your hip than just run? I have a bad hip. I have 2 6-inch pins in my femur. So
I have a high pain tolerance, but it keeps me fit.
Yeah, so do I. Breathe, brother. In fact, I was in the UK over a year ago with a former employee and wonderful person, Denny Adams. And I've had knee surgery and she's had knee surgery. And she was talking about her PT test that she had to do. I was like, oh, doesn't that hurt? She goes, yeah, but I'm not a little person. And I was like, oh, crap. So literally that day I started running. I was like, yeah, suck it up. If Denny can do it, no one can do it, honestly, because she's incredible. But she motivated me. If you were going to motivate the field, see, I'm bringing this back, and you're going to give us advice to these people who, one, everybody should read your book. I think you're a super smart guy, and you've looked at it very well. You've analyzed it very well, I should say. If you're going to give them advice outside of reading your book, because they should, what starting points should they look at in terms of becoming more resilient as a community member?
So community is the name of the game right there. And I'll take it with this, just some short, quick anecdotes and stories. I talked about SPIES earlier on: social, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. The two bookends, the social and the spiritual, are the ones that are the most powerful, which is why they're on the end. But I'll end with the community portion of emotional. So emotions are incredibly powerful. We tell stories, we tell these parables, we tell these traditions in our societies, communities. It's what keeps a culture going. When I was in Switzerland a couple of months ago, we were visiting this town that was on the edge of a 2,000 or 3,000 foot cliff. It was gorgeous. We were in the foothills of the Alps. But one of the stories they would tell their children is about this old hookman. And old hookman was a evil man that would live just below the cliff's edge, and he had this long hook. And if any children ever got close to the cliff, he would snatch them with their hook and eat them and break their bones and things like that. So it was a way to tell the children, don't get close to the cliffs. So that's one story. And we have these sayings. Samuel Johnson wrote, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. So that's how we kind of keep these things going along in disaster. So I'll give two final stories on that very quickly. One, just to kind of end it on Japan. Japan experiences tsunamis for thousands of years. If you go up into Japan, up into the hills, they have these gorgeous stone markers. And they say different things, but I read one, I had it translated, and it said this: high dwellings are the peace and harmony of our descendants. Remember the calamity of the great tsunamis. Do not build any homes below this point.
Yeah, I've seen those actually. That's wild.
These stories of disasters that just go on. So my final point is this, for the people that are kind of listening: you can't save the world. I was stationed in Hawaii previously, and we got to go to the Big Island. It was absolutely stunningly gorgeous. You've got the Kilauea volcanoes. You've got the unbelievable snorkeling that they have there. The fish so thick that you're swimming through them with your hands like breaststroke. You have to like push the fish to the side.
That's cool
because it's so gorgeous. But if you go near the volcanoes, they have these things called kipukas. And I saw this and it just blew my mind. A kipuka is an area when the lava comes down the hill. Sometimes there are these areas of forest and greenery that don't get touched. They get completely surrounded by lava flows, but all the animals run to that because they're trying to escape the lava. And so these kipukas officially are basically just these areas where lava's been encircled it. And it's kind of like this crucial ecological refugee area, an oasis. But in Hawaiian, it's more of a philosophical concept. What it means is that it's a protected place. And so these emergency managers, the people listening to the show, the people that do these disaster things, you're not going to be able to save everybody, but maybe you can provide a kipuka for those that you do save. Maybe you can be a kipuka in your own town. Maybe you can be a kipuka in your own resilient citizen way for your locality, for your household, for your family. That's my final thoughts.
That's the mic drop moment right there. We always look for the mic drop moment. You just gave it to us. So that's pretty great. Chris, it is such an honor to be able to talk to you and to hear your thought process. I really think you should go and talk with Nat. I would love to hear the way both of you speak, because you have very similar thought process. And so I'm going to give that, I'll connect you with him. And for all those who are listening, again, every once in a while we get a pretty cool author on here. I think you should read his book. If this podcast hasn't intrigued you or not, you're probably pretty dumb, straight up. So be a smart person, keep reading, keep learning, follow Chris's example of keep learning, and tune in for our next episode. We try to do these basically every week. And with that, like, subscribe, the whole deal. Peace.